The Gauteng provincial government says it was in the process of getting rid of unsafe buildings. Firefighters worked into the night trying to put out a blaze at a government building in a Johannesburg CBD yesterday. The fire claimed the lives of 3 firefighters. 2 are still in a critical condition. To discuss this further, we're now joined by Gauteng MEC for Infrastructure and Development, Jacob Mamabolo. MEC, thank you for coming in. Thanks for being with us here on the program.
Good morning to you and to all the viewers.
Let's begin the interview by getting an update on those that are in hospital right now. We know that 13 were rushed to hospital. What are we looking at right now?
Well, firstly, let me just convey our sincere condolences to the families of the 3 firefighters who lost their lives. Last night, together with the Premier of the province and Minister Tulas of Public Works, and the acting executive mayor of the city of Joburg and the MMC, we visited Mel Park Hospital, and we found that all the other firefighters and officials of the department were released. We are only having about 5. And in the 5, there's 1 employee of the Department of Health, and there's about 4 firefighters that are in hospital. The doctors gave us the assurance that none of the admitted patients is critical. Okay. All of them will hopefully get well and be released, and that is the good part about the report we received at the hospital. Okay,
so there's still 5 in hospital, 1 employee and 4 firefighters, none in a critical condition.
Yes.
So we're on track to hopefully having them out and recovering well.
Yes.
Okay, MEC, let's get into some issues now about what actually happened yesterday, because we saw the Premier, David Makhura, speaking about the annual conditional assessment, which, of course, came out. It's done on the building, accommodating your staff, and the condition of this building was atrocious, to say the least. I mean, getting a 21% compliance for safety standards. Nobody should have been in that building, and it's an annual report. So obviously this isn't something that just suddenly happened. This has probably been going on for a while. Why were you still using this building without fixing it up?
Well, firstly, let me just say that yesterday when we received the sad news about the incident, we immediately rushed to the scene, and one of the issues we immediately announced should happen is an investigation on the causes of the fire, because that has to be determined. And also it will be very important for the families to find closure and healing, that we also investigate what were the causes of death of the firefighters. Now, with respect to the condition of the buildings, we did yesterday, myself and the Premier acknowledged that over the years, the conditions of our buildings has been found to be requiring urgent intervention and improvement. That's why the provincial government over the years had announced a program to refurbish and make sure that our buildings comply and are in good condition. We have a project to deal with that. Last year in and around August, when we received complaints from different stakeholders and most importantly from the organized labor on the conditions of the buildings, we then said, let's commission a proper process to determine the actual conditions of the building so that we can have a holistic and comprehensive program to fix and improve the buildings. So the condition assessment that was commissioned last year was a direct response to the complaints that we have been receiving, and we commissioned 8 buildings. And Bank of Lisbon, which is the one that houses the Department of Health, COCTA, and Human Settlement, was one of the 8. And yesterday I did announce that the report which we received just last week, Monday, on the 27th of August this year, pointed out to the fact that that particular building was not compliant with occupation and safety standards. And it is for that reason that Premier last night announced that even with the remaining 7 buildings, and we will be doing that just now because we're looking at the report once we received it and looking at what is it that should be fixed quickly and fast. So we have announced that we will make sure that based on this report that we just received last week, we immediately intervene, and where the report indicates any of the 7 remaining buildings that are non-compliant, we should immediately evacuate people from those buildings.
Absolutely. I mean, that should be done as a matter of urgency. It should be done today.
We will be doing that.
Nehawu have been complaining. They say that their staff have been complaining and saying that the condition of the building has been terrible, and they've been telling you for a while that we shouldn't be in these buildings. They're not safe to be working in, and yet nothing was done. And now we've got 3 lives that have been lost because of it. You know, it's difficult to sort of listen to say, okay, well, now we will do something. Why were you not listening at the time?
Well, as I did say, the fact that we have commissioned a process because when you deal with...
Let me ask this. Have you ever been into the building? When was the last time you went into the building?
Well, firstly, remember that I was MEC of Human Settlements and COCTA in 2014, just 1 year, 6 months, so I know the building. And when I went to DID and received the complaints, and as part of the work that we do, we have done, for example, condition assessments of hospitals. We do conditions assessment of buildings. It's something that we do. But in this particular case, when we receive the complaints, including from workers, because these are problems that have been there over many years. For example, in 2001, there's been a project called Kopanom Precinct, whose purpose is exactly to make sure that the complex of our offices meet all the necessary requirements for proper working conditions, for service delivery for people to work in. So when we are in last year in August, in direct response to those issues that Nehawu has been raising, that's why we commissioned the study. And the purpose of that is then how should and when can we fix and what to be fixed. But let me also just add that just over 4 or 5 months ago, we had started with the process of finding a building for the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, which is COCTA. We have already appointed a service provider to provide them with an alternative building. Okay. The Department of Human Settlements, this week we are finalizing appointment of a service provider to give them a building. So fire is an accident. It's something that nobody can foretell. Even a building in the state-of-the-art new brand building can catch fire. That's why the causes must be found. We must investigate. Premier's office, which is one of the best high-security point, caught fire last year. Yeah. So fire can happen to any building. When we say the condition of the building was not compliance, we should also make the point and emphasize it that whenever fire break out, it must be independently investigated and get to know what caused it.
Well, there's a lot of speculation at this point, and we do know.
And with fire, we mustn't speculate.
And we do know that there are investigations. I understand that. Yeah. But, and I have to emphasize the but, when you have a building that is only 21% safety compliant, this is a tragedy waiting to happen. Nobody should be in there. Can you admit to negligence on your part?
As I said, that when we received complaints about the condition of the buildings, we announced that, remember that it was us last night who said the report points out this building was non-compliant, and this is based on the report that we have commissioned. Without that report, without having taken deliberate steps to commission the investigation, we would have not known that the building is 21% non-compliant. So that is part of the deliberate, swift and prompt steps we took to make sure that we know exactly what parts of the building are not in good condition. Remember also, the structural parts of the building were not condemned. And the floor 1 up to 10, which is where the buildings were really seriously condemned, there was no fire there. Yeah. The fire happened on the 23rd floor, which is the Department of Health, and that part of the building was never condemned at any given point. So only now, with the report that we have commissioned and we have disclosed its contents, do we now know the truth and the facts about the condition of the building. So, and
I also want to, okay, we've spoken about that, but what I'm gathering from you is that we cannot talk too much until we know, because a fire needs to have this investigation done.
Absolutely.
There have been a lot of rumors that have been going and doing the rounds as well, that floor, that specific floor, was under investigation. The 23rd floor has been under investigation for corruption activities that have been happening at different hospitals. This is a lot of information in there that obviously has now been destroyed. And there's a little bit of suspicious activity that is being questioned right now. Is that being investigated, that perhaps this could be a case of arson?
You see, that's precisely the point we're making. We must never, ever speculate about fire, even if it is tempting to do that, because fire can be caused by a deliberate person trying to frustrate certain things, tamper with evidence, so it can be caused deliberately, even if the building is in good condition. Fire can be caused by somebody plugging in appliances that are not complied with. So once there's an incident of fire, however tempting it might be, however the seriousness of speculations, we must always be patient to wait for the real facts, because otherwise we are going to create all forms of sensation, we are going to create all forms of speculation. The families will never find closure, and those that were injured. So every fire, whatever the condition of the building, must be investigated. So I wouldn't want to speculate. It is true that where the fire started is Legal Services Department. We know what is happening in the Department of Health about all sorts.
Investigations
but we mustn't, please, we mustn't, and I want to emphasize that. Fire can break in any building, whatever its condition is. We must not speculate on that issue. Let's wait for the investigation. By the way, including why workers died. Because fire, remember, yesterday when the fire happened, we evacuated 1,115 people from 23 floors. All of them were safely, promptly and swiftly evacuated out of the building. So the post-evacuation tragic loss of life, that part, particularly affecting firefighters who are professionals and experts in dealing with fire, that has to be independently determined.
And that's what I need to speak to you about as well, because I know we need to get into another interview. This investigation into the firefighters, because I am myself asking a lot of questions about this, and I think so are a lot of South Africans, talking about, and I don't think you are qualified to talk about this, but the training of the firefighters that have gone in, the equipment that they were using, did they have a charge line as they entered the building? Did they have the necessary breathing equipment when they went in there? These are obviously things you can't talk about, but
let me just,
would you like to comment on that? Because I don't want to put you on the spot for something like that.
Look, our government is founded on spheres of government with deliberate roles and responsibilities. Our role as a provincial government, because we don't have the competence to deal with incidences of fire and or whatever the tragedies of this type that could happen. Once we evacuate people, and as I said, that was done successfully, all of them accounted for. Once that happens, firefighters of the city of Joburg and any other municipality, once they take over the building, it's a completely different jurisdiction.
Yeah.
We can't speculate about because the families will want to know, if 1,115 people were safely evacuated out of the building, how come these three post that died? So that part, it's precisely what government must investigate promptly and swiftly and give all of us a report to know what happened to the three. Okay. But that is a competence of another sphere of government.
Indeed.
Once more, I wouldn't want to speculate on
and that's why I don't want to pose these questions to you, because I think that this is where we need to get the actual fire services in emergency services. Yes. We need to talk about these things. There are guidelines that should be in place when it comes to these emergency situations. Was there a charge line? There's talk that perhaps there wasn't. 2 firefighters need to be together, 2 need to be outside. Did they have radios? Could they call for help? Were there spare cylinders? There's so many questions that need to be answered with regard to that. But for your side, we wait for the investigations to find out how this fire was caused. Jacob Mamabolo, the Gauteng MEC for Infrastructure Development, thank you. And again, please pass our condolences on to those families that have lost their loved ones. Thank you.
We will do, and we'll be visiting the families of the deceased today.
Thank you. Thank you very much, MEC. We take a break. We'll see you after this.